First contact and cultural shock. The crystalline ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, its transparent hull refracting sunlight into rainbow patterns across the Nevada desert. Inside, lead researcher Naira adjusted her atmospheric sensors, her silver skin shimming with nervous energy. After 3 decades of observing Earth from orbit, the Galaxian Science Council had finally approved direct contact. Preliminary scans indicate optimal landing conditions, her assistant Vex announced, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. Though I must note, lead researcher, the human gathering below exceeds predicted numbers. Naira moved to the observation panel, noting the crowd of scientists, officials, and media representatives gathered at the designated landing site. Among them stood their primary contact, Dr. James Sullivan, the renowned anthropologist who'd been chosen to bridge their worlds. The ship settled onto the desert floor with barely a whisper. Naira took a moment to verify her translator's functionality and straightened her ceremonial robes. Remember, she addressed her team of 12 researchers, we are here to study human pair bonding rituals. Our preliminary orbital observations have revealed practices that defy all known sociological patterns. The team emerged from their ship into the bright desert sun. Dr. Sullivan stepped forward, his dark skin glistening with sweat, a broad smile crossing his face. Naira had studied human facial expressions extensively, but seeing one in person was remarkably different from holographic projections. "Welcome to Earth," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. James Sullivan, head of the Cultural Exchange Initiative." Naira stared at his extended hand, remembering the briefing about this gesture. She reached out, completing the handshake with careful precision. The warmth of his skin against hers sent her sensory receptors into overdrive. The first few hours were spent in protocol meetings and formal introductions, but it wasn't until they reached the university campus that things became truly interesting. As they walked through the sprawling grounds, Naira's team encountered their first unscripted human interaction. A young couple sat beneath a tree, their faces pressed together in what Naira recognized as a kiss. Her team immediately began taking readings, their sensors humming with activity. Lead researcher, Vex whispered urgently, "Their hormone levels are spiking. Should we initiate quarantine protocols?" Dr. Sullivan chuckled, having overheard. "No need for quarantine. They're just kissing. It's a common expression of affection among humans." Naira's central processing ridge pulsed with confusion. "But our studies indicate this behavior serves no biological function. Why do they exchange oral bacteria?" "Not everything humans do serves a purely biological function," James explained, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Some things we do simply because they feel good or help us connect emotionally." The concept of actions without practical purpose was alien to the Galaxians. Their society operated on pure logic and efficiency. Every gesture, every interaction had a specific function for survival or societal advancement. As they continued their tour, they encountered more displays of human affection. Friends hugging, an elderly couple holding hands, a mother cradling her child. Each instance sent Naira's team into a flurry of data collection and confused discussions. "Dr. Sullivan," Naira finally said, "our preliminary research indicated humans mate for reproduction, like most species, but these displays suggest something more complex." James nodded, leading them into the anthropology building. "Human relationships are about more than reproduction. We form emotional bonds, connections that go beyond biological imperatives. Love, as we call it, is central to our society." Love, Naira tested the word, her translator struggling with the concept. "This requires further study. Our mission parameters may need significant adjustment." That evening, as the team compiled their first day's observations, Naira found herself watching a family playing in a nearby park through their base's observation window. The parents swung their child between them, all 3 laughing in a display of what humans called joy. "Vex," she called to her assistant, "make a note. Human pair bonding appears to serve multiple functions beyond reproduction. Their concept of love may be more significant to their species' success than we initially hypothesized. As the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows across their crystalline ship, Naira realized this mission would challenge everything her people thought they knew about intelligent life. Humans, it seemed, had evolved beyond mere biological imperatives to create something both illogical and apparently essential to their existence: the science of love. The Zylaxian research facility gleamed under fluorescent lights, its walls lined with holographic displays showing various human couples in different stages of interaction. Lead researcher Naira stood before the central display, her silver skin reflecting data streams as they scrolled past. "These readings make no logical sense," she declared, gesturing to a chart showing oxytocin and dopamine levels in human subjects. The same neurochemical response occurs whether they're engaging in reproduction or simply maintaining eye contact while holding hands. Dr. James Sullivan leaned against a console, watching the aliens' increasing frustration with barely concealed amusement. "That's because love isn't just about reproduction for us. The emotional connection can be just as powerful as the physical one." Vex, hovering nearby with his data pad, made an agitated clicking sound. "But how do you measure the success rate of these connections? What metrics determine an optimal mate beyond reproductive compatibility?" "That's not really how it works," James explained. "Sometimes people just click." The entire research team stopped their activities to stare at him. "Click?" Naira asked, her translator struggling with the colloquialism. "You select mates based on auditory feedback." James couldn't help but laugh. No, it's a figure of speech. It means people connect on an emotional level that can't always be quantified." This statement caused such distress among the Zylaxian researchers that 3 of them had to take a meditation break to realign their logical centers. Naira, however, remained determined to understand. She pulled up footage from their observation drones. "Yesterday we recorded 17 instances of humans pressing their mouths together without any subsequent mating behavior. This seems highly inefficient." "Kissing isn't about efficiency," James said, stepping closer to the display. "It's about showing affection, building intimacy." "But how do you measure intimacy?" Vex interrupted, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly in succession. "What units of measurement apply to these abstract concepts?" James ran a hand through his graying hair. "Not everything that matters can be measured. Some things you just have to feel." The word "feel" sent another wave of discomfort through the research team. Their species had evolved beyond the need for such imprecise methods of interaction. Every aspect of Zylaxian society was carefully calculated, measured, and optimized. "Perhaps," Naira suggested, "we should conduct controlled experiments. Observe human coupling behavior under laboratory conditions." "Absolutely not," James said firmly. "Love isn't something you can recreate in a lab. It's spontaneous, unexpected. Sometimes it happens instantly, sometimes it grows over time." As if to illustrate his point, the facility's doors slid open, and Dr. Isabella Martinez, the team's neuroscientist, walked in. She carried several brain scan results and was deep in conversation with junior researcher Kyle, the youngest member of the Zylaxian team. "These neural patterns are fascinating," Isabella was saying, her dark eyes bright with excitement. "The way human brains light up during emotional bonding is similar to..." She stopped, noticing everyone watching them. Kyle's usually pale silver skin had taken on a slight bluish tinge, a detail that didn't escape Naira's attention. "Dr. Martinez," Naira said, "perhaps you can help us understand. How do humans determine compatibility without proper molecular analysis and genetic screening?" Isabella smiled, setting down her papers. "We call it chemistry." "Ah!" Vex exclaimed triumphantly. "Finally, a scientific explanation." "Not that kind of chemistry," James interjected quickly, before the aliens could break out their molecular scanners again. "It's another figure of speech. It means when 2 people feel a natural attraction or connection." Naira's frustration was reaching critical levels. Every answer seemed to lead to more questions. How could a species advance so far technologically while relying on such imprecise methods of mate selection? Yet she couldn't help noticing how Kyle lingered near Dr. Martinez, how his usual precise movements became slightly less coordinated in her presence. Most concerning of all, his typically meticulous research notes had become filled with observations about the fascinating complexity of human emotional responses and the unexpected elegance of non-logical decision-making. Later that evening, as the research team compiled their daily reports, Naira added a private note to her personal log. Human pair bonding appears to be contagious. Junior researcher Kyle showing concerning signs of emotional contamination. Recommend increased shielding protocols. Yet, their apparent satisfaction with this chaotic system raises questions about our own methods. Further study required. She looked out the window at the setting sun, watching a couple walk hand in hand across the university campus. Their behavior defied every logical parameter, yet they appeared to be functioning at peak efficiency. Perhaps there was something to this chemistry after all. Little did she know, these observations would soon become far more personal than any of them had anticipated. Breaking protocol. The incident that changed everything happened 3 weeks into the mission. Junior researcher Kyle and Dr. Isabella Martinez were analyzing brain scan data when their hands accidentally touched across the console. Instead of withdrawing, Kyle lingered for 2.3 seconds longer than protocol dictated. Naira, watching through the lab's surveillance system, felt her logical centers screaming in alarm. Vex, initiate quarantine procedures. Wait, Dr. Sullivan interrupted, placing a restraining hand on her arm. Let's observe. This is exactly the kind of natural interaction we've been studying. Kyle's silver skin had taken on an iridescent quality, his neural patterns displaying unprecedented fluctuations. Isabella's heart rate had elevated, her pupils dilated, all classic signs of human attraction. I find your research methods intriguing, Kyle said softly, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his voice. Isabella smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. And I find your perspective fascinating. The way you see things. It's like poetry written in data. The word poetry triggered emergency alerts throughout the facility. 3 senior researchers immediately began decontamination procedures. But Naira, despite her better judgment, raised a hand to stop them. Universal emotions. Over the next few days, strange occurrences multiplied. Kyle began using imprecise language, making statements about the beauty of neural patterns and the dance of electromagnetic frequencies. Worse still, other researchers showed signs of contamination. Vex started humming during data analysis, a completely non-essential activity. 2 junior scientists were caught watching human entertainment videos instead of conducting their assigned studies. Even Naira found herself lingering over recordings of human family interactions, particularly those showing what humans called unconditional love. The crisis point came during a routine presentation to the Science Council. As Kyle presented his findings on human pair bonding, he did the unthinkable. He smiled. The council erupted in chaos. This mission has been compromised, the High Counselor declared. All personnel must return immediately for emotional decontamination. But as Naira prepared to give the evacuation order, she witnessed something extraordinary. Isabella had entered the conference room, and Kyle's entire being seemed to illuminate in her presence. His usually rigid posture softened, his movements became fluid, and his voice carried something the translator identified as warmth. In that moment, Naira understood. They hadn't been contaminated by human emotions. They'd discovered their own. Bridge between worlds. The final report to the Science Council was unprecedented in Zylaxian history. Naira stood before the holographic projection of the council members, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. Our mission to study human mating habits has revealed something far more significant, she declared. Humans haven't survived despite their emotional connections. They've thrived because of them. These bonds create resilience, drive innovation, and foster cooperation in ways our purely logical approach cannot match. She gestured to where Kyle and Isabella stood together, their hands intertwined. Furthermore, we've discovered that our own species possesses the capacity for emotional connection. We simply evolved to suppress it in our pursuit of perfect logic. The council chambers erupted in shocked murmurs, but Naira continued. I propose a new initiative, a cultural exchange program that explores the balance between logic and emotion. Our species has much to learn from each other. Dr. Sullivan stepped forward, adding his support. Throughout human history, our greatest achievements have come from combining reason with passion, logic with love. Imagine what our species could accomplish together. The High Counselor was silent for a long moment. Finally, they spoke. Lead researcher Naira, your findings are highly irregular. They challenge our most fundamental beliefs about efficient societal function. A pause. They also represent the most fascinating discovery in recent Silaxian history. Proposal accepted. Epilogue. 1 year later, the first Silaxian Human Cultural Center opened its doors. Inside, silver-skinned researchers worked alongside human scientists, studying everything from quantum physics to poetry. In the central courtyard, Kyle and Isabella had created a garden that combined earth plants with crystalline Silaxian structures, a living symbol of their united future. Naira, watching from her office window, noticed her reflection in the glass. Her own silver skin had developed a subtle iridescence, something the humans called glow. Her logical centers still processed data with perfect efficiency, but now they worked in harmony with something new, something the humans called heart. As she updated her final mission log, she added one last note. Perhaps the greatest discovery was not understanding why humans mate differently, but realizing that love, in all its forms, might be the most logical force in the universe after all. Outside, the sun set over the desert, casting rainbow patterns through the crystalline structures of the research center. Inside, two species learned from each other, growing, changing, and proving that even in the vast expanse of space, the heart might be the best navigator of all.